And welcome back to the Capitol Report. So how would American students be affected by President Trump's plans to diminish the Department of Education and delegate control to the states? Joining me now to discuss these latest developments is Nicole Neily, president and founder of Parents Defending Education. Nicole Neily, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you with us, Nikki. So President Trump reportedly considering an executive order to gut Department of Education. Talk to us about how this might affect funding for schools, especially for those people that, may only watch their local nightly news and, think that this could be catastrophic for their children and the future of their children.
Yeah, I think we're in a little bit of a Chicken Little situation right now. This is not going to happen next week. This is not going to turn off the spigot, even though we saw that happen with USAID. The department is in place statutorily, and so there will be hurdles that have to jump through. That being said, a lot of what the department does can and probably should be offshored to other agencies over the next couple of years. We have seen the Department of Education really mess up the FAFSA for student loans for colleges. That is probably a function that would be more efficiently run out of the Treasury Department. The fact that we have both an Office for Civil Rights at the Department of Justice as well as the Department of Education raises questions. And so as we look for government efficiencies, I think to get rid of some of the superfluous things that Ed, frankly, has not been very good at so that they can actually focus on student achievement is something that should be common sense, and I think we'll be able to both start to build a case for the next couple of years.
Now, as the founder and president of Parents Defending Education, talk to us about your thoughts about the Department of Education and, without it, what the best path forward would be.
Well, I think we're really excited right now to actually have people who are in the driver's seat of the Education Department and in the White House who actually look at parents as being a stakeholder in this. For the past 4 years, it has been nothing but activists and activist organizations, teachers' unions. We have not had a seat at the table. And so to have Linda McMahon and President Trump, who are both business people who view families and students as customers in this equation, I think is really refreshing because they're actually starting to say, what do you want? What do you need? And what do parents want? They want actual quality. We just watched the latest NAEP scores come out, which is the nation's report card. Unsurprisingly, schools are in bad shape. The bottom fell out, particularly among the bottom quadrant. But frankly, even before COVID, the scores were not great. American education has not been anything to write home about. And so if President Trump's plan is to change up the status quo, the status quo is broken and we have a lost generation of children. And so I'm all in for any kind of change that might actually be more responsive.
Now, an executive order from the president would put whatever he decides into effect up until his term. And if the next president, say, is a Democrat and doesn't like it, they could rescind it. You were up on Capitol Hill today testifying before Congress. Do you think Trump could get support from Congress to completely get rid of this department?
Yeah, I think what's going to be really interesting is the EOs are, I think of it almost like a skeleton. And so it's up to both Congress as well as kind of the agencies then to put meat on the bones. This is not just, I think back to the Obama years when he said, look, I have a pen and a phone. I can do whatever I want. That's not how we operate as a country. We are a nation of laws. And so there will have to be legislation that passes through both chambers to improve, to redirect things, as well as for the department, there are still grant funds that have to go out. There are grant funds that were actually awarded during the Biden administration. We identified $1 billion in DEI-related funding. Some of that has been paused and will be clawed back. But yeah, I think there's going to be a very slow and deliberate process, again, because with President Trump and Linda McMahon being business people, they know you can't just turn off the lights and stop paying vendors. And so I think there will be a respectful way and thoughtful way of winding things down as they see fit.
Now, the idea is to shift education back into the hands of the state. If, Trump's plan succeeds and he is able to do that and turn education back over to the states, would that give local school districts more autonomy and control over curriculum and standards? And what are the pros and cons to that?
It definitely would. But let's remember, education is, and frankly always has been in this country, a state and a local issue, responsive to both local demands, cultural sensitivities. I grew up in Chicago. We always had Casimir Pulaski Day off in March, a random day that most other places didn't get. My husband was from Texas. They always had, Juneteenth was always celebrated down there. It's not something that we had up north. And so I think to the extent where we see districts that are actually able to take that money and run with it, let's remember, he who pays the piper calls the tune. And when the federal government gives money to states or local education agencies, there come a lot of strings attached with it, be it grant funding or be it other programmatic ones. And as much as people are freaking out right now about Trump saying, all right, you can't discriminate on the basis of race, they never should have been doing it in the first place. Unfortunately, my organization has identified thousands of problems in districts across the country over the past several years where they have been treating students differently on the basis of race. They have been treating students differently on the basis of sex. And for districts to now be fearful that they will be caught doing that and to start to triangulate is something that we never should have gotten to this place to start with. But I'm glad that there's a new sheriff in town to actually hold them accountable.
So to your point, when it comes to the civil rights of students, how will bringing education back to the states better and further protect them?
Remember, the Department of Education was only created in 1979. And so American education worked very well before that. And frankly, test scores were better before that. The latest NAEP scores showed, again, that schools are not doing very well. But let's remember that even state proficiency levels sometimes are at or below what NAEP scores are. And so I think as parents, we see, and we have felt for many years, my third grader doesn't seem to know the same things that I knew as a third grader a couple years ago. That's true. And so we really want states to compete against each other to offer a good product and to have control over what they offer and where they offer it and in the manner in which they do so. So I think it is going to be a good thing for the states to actually have more control over this, for localities to have more control over this, because again, before 1979, it's not that disabled children or poor kids didn't have access to a quality education. They did, and frankly, most American children were better off then.
Lastly, will there be, or do you see any role for the federal government to have in education, whether it be funding or allocation thereof?
I mean, having seen all these districts that have been violating Title VI, Title IX, the First Amendment, I do think there is a role for the federal government in some capacity, not necessarily through the Department of Education, to oversee and ensure that the laws of this country are followed. It's been really interesting just to watch different states and different districts talk about how they're going to resist the president's plan on various initiatives, on immigration, on gender orders. There is something called the Supremacy Clause. They do have to respect federal law. And so I think as we see districts that try to not or evade that or otherwise put those programs that they want to do, offering racial preferences underground, I do think the federal government will have to keep an eye out and hold them accountable.
Nicole Neily, founder of Parents Defending Education, thank you so much.
Thank you.